RH, quer saber como voar no trabalho? É só usar a Flash. Com a Flash, você concentra toda a gestão de pessoas em um único lugar. Faça a admissão dos colaboradores e solicite mais de 8 categorias de benefícios. Ah, e você ainda pode fazer todo o controle de ponto. Conheça o novo onboarding integrado da Flash em flashapp.com.br.
Olha o contra-ataque aí, vem que vem o time avançando rápido pela meio de campo. Bola dominada no pé do camisa 10. Ele vai pra cima, passou pelo primeiro, passou pelo segundo. E bateu a grande área, vai chutar. Bateu, é gol! Que golaço, minha gente!
A experiência de futebol mais autêntica já criada para os games. Junte-se no 5v5 Rush, a nova maneira de jogar com os amigos e leve seu clube para a vitória. EA Sports FC 25. Dê tudo pelo clube. Já disponível.
Most of the good songs as well, I think, were written mainly in the pub on the backs of beer mats while waiting for the Gang of Four to put their instruments down and come down and have a pint.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Live Through That. I'm your host, Mike Hipple, and on this podcast, we'll dig a little deeper into a pivotal moment into the lives of some of my favorite artists from the 80s and 90s. We're back on track this week with a brand new episode after a little break that we took last week. So just a reminder to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so that you'll know when the latest episode comes out. This week, I'm pleased to have Jon Langford from the Mekons on the show. I've recently become obsessed with the band's second single from 1978, Where Were You?, and I went down a little Mekons rabbit hole. Their first single, Never Been in a Riot, is a 2-minute blast of energy written as a response to the Clash's White Riot. Where Were You, by contrast, seemed to me like a big jump forward in terms of songwriting. It's kind of an exhilarating song with verses that were made to shout out loud to. I was curious about this evolution, and I asked Jon about it. He starts at the beginning of the Mekons story.
The Mekons were a bunch of art students hanging out together in Leeds, in the north of England. I met them in October 1976 when I moved there. I met Andy and Mark, and they introduced me to Kevin. Sort of somewhere through that academic year at university in the fine art department, we all agreed we weren't very interested in fine art and what was going on in the punk rock world. The shock waves coming up the motorway from London, bands like The Clash and the Sex Pistols, that was what was really interesting to us. And it was a way of making art where we weren't being judged by old modernist arts teachers, and we were doing our own thing and being judged by kids on the street. Most of the songs of that period, right the way through to the first album, I think most of the good songs as well, I think, were written mainly in the pub on the backs of beer mats while waiting for the Gang of Four to put their instruments down and come down and have a pint. And we would go up and take their instruments and go up into the Film Society room above the Fenton pub. I think it's on Woodhouse Lane, right by the university. We would go up and try to make songs. We didn't want to be a band particularly that was going to be successful or artistically even interesting. We just wanted to be the Gang of Four's opening act, and it seemed like a really kind of good proposition at the time. Things were pretty wide open, and we felt like a lot of the doors had been kicked down, and you could pretty much do whatever you wanted to do. The songs on the first single and the songs on the second single were written pretty much the same time. So I think Where Were You was knocking around for quite a long time, and that's the song that Bob Last, who ran Fast Product, actually advertised it in comparison to the first single, Never Been in a Riot. He compared it to, what did you say? They did an advert and it said, the Mekons' new awareness of sound. So I think the main difference between those two records was that one was recorded in a holiday cottage in Scotland on an old 2-track tape machine, and the second one was recorded at Space Ward Studios in Cambridge, which was somewhere We were there, rough trade, we're using it a lot. And I remember meeting Mayo Thompson from Red Crayola there when we made Where Were You. That was kind of exciting because we all knew about him from art, language, intellectual kind of like arty stuff. So that was kind of legitimizing in some way that we were moving in these sorts of circles. But yeah, the first single we went up to somewhere in the borderlands between Leeds and Edinburgh, where the record label was based, and went to somebody's holiday cottage. Somebody belonged to someone's parents, and it was locked, and we couldn't get in. We had to break in and then set up all this equipment. And we'd really never tried to record anything before, and Never Been in a Riot was a response to the Clash's White Riot, a song which definitely failed in translation by the time it got up to Leeds, because I know what Joe Strummer was trying to do with that song. He was trying to pledge solidarity with West Indian youth who were rioting on the streets of London during the Notting Hill riots at that time, something he'd actually witnessed firsthand. And it was part of him sort of saying, we need to be like these black kids, we want a white riot. By the time that got up to Leeds, people were the sort of dumb asses on the streets in Leeds thought it was a fascist anthem, and the Clash were like a fascist band. And people like Susie Sue and Sid Vicious wearing swastikas didn't really help. And it caused a lot of trouble, a lot of violence. There was a lot of street violence in clubs, a lot of nasty right-wing elements trying to infiltrate the punk scene, which was initially just fun. And I would say that song "Never Been in a Right" was just our attempt to answer that. But a lot of the songs, Mark White wrote most of the lyrics. Chalky, as we called him, Chalky White. He wrote the lyrics basically in a response, I would say, to Pete Shelley and what he was doing with the Buzzcocks. We were very impressed with the way Pete Shelley wrote. As a bisexual man, he was writing and non-gender specific. It wasn't boy-girl love songs where the boy was dominant. It was a whole different thing. He really changed things, and it was very interesting. I know Mark was trying to write in a non-gender specific way and write about vulnerability of a male rather than the sort of macho dominance that went through most of rock music. Well, we wrote them together. He wrote the words, and then I guess Kevin came up with that tune. But it was written around the same time as we needed songs for our very first gig opening for the Rosillos at the Ace of Clubs in October 1977. And most of the songs were slow, so we had to speed them up. We decided we'd be the first punk band to only do slow songs. And the promoter, John Keenan, who still promotes my gigs in Leeds to this very day, told us we get torn apart by the punks if we didn't play fast. You had to play fast in 1977. So we played then we ended up with like a cozy 15-minute set because all the songs were double speed. But Where Were You was always a mid-paced song, and Never Been in a Riot and 32 Weeks and Heart and Soul were things we came up with pretty much around the same time as Where Were You. But Where Were You did betray some sort of poppiness, and I would not dare to say sophistication, but there's something more melodic going on with it, and something more groovy, and something that swings a little bit. And that's definitely what I was trying to do with the drums. And also, it was just this one repeated guitar riff, and it needed something. So we came up with the idea of the big, exciting drum fill at the beginning. Basically, that song is an exercise in dynamics. When I play it with other bands, people often want to, if I got a solo gig and I've got a band, and they'll say, well, let's do Where Were You? Because, it's a nice song to do as an encore. People really like it, but it's it's deceptively tricky, I would say. There's something going on with that song that's, if you get it wrong, slightly wrong, it just becomes mundane. But if you get it exactly right, which somehow we managed to do at Space Ward when we recorded it. Yeah, it's just something about the tempo of it and something about the way it really is like what we were talking about. We were talking a lot about the Gang of Four as well. What we liked about soul music and reggae music, and how everything was functional and served the song. We didn't want to have guitar solos, and rather than having a guitar solo, we always had that idea that maybe like dub reggae, what would be interesting would if something dropped out and then something was exposed. So I think Where Were You is kind of like that. There's sort of the big, exciting drum roll at the beginning, which gets everyone's attention, and it's kind of really droning on. But what's the best bit is when the drums stop, and you just hear the guitar on its own with a kick drum, and that's really kind of exciting. And then it's we were involved in lots of theories about demystifying the means of production and shit like that, but actually it's just something that an economy and functionality of the music is really where the magic lies.
That's Jon playing drums on Where Were You, but he soon moved over to guitar. I was curious about how that happened and how an accidental meeting changed the course of the Mekons.
We were working on. We were very bored. As I said, we wrote those songs in a clump for the first gig, and then we added to that catalog of songs a little bit. But once the first single came out, we were gigging a lot, and we didn't really know what we were doing. We were just out on the road, and then we got swept up into John Peel sessions. He really liked us, and we were getting lots of gigs, and David Bowie was playing us on the radio, and it was it was very exciting. And then we signed to Virgin Record for some reason, Richard Branson's label, Virgin Records, and ended up in a country house in the Oxfordshire countryside, recording our first album, which is songs we'd had knocking around for at that stage 2 years, and it was very tedious process. But when we made that album, I think Public Image had been in there the week before, and we were listening to what they were doing and just thinking, there's something else to this. We're doing stuff that's 2 years old, which seemed to be a vast, trying to capture it in this totally sterile environment that wasn't anywhere we should have been. But was convenient for the record company because it was costing the Mekons loads of money, which they could just pay back to themselves because they owned the studio. We all a big eye opener. Everything was very. Anything you heard about the music business is absolutely true. It's such a pile of shit, and we went off to we decided we would. Well, we didn't decide. We were disillusioned. We didn't like the way it worked out. We were used to having had 2 records out that did well, and nearly everything on Virgin was kind of not panned critically, but it just wasn't as exciting. And people weren't that excited about it. It was that we felt like we were old hat, and we wanted to do something different. So we went to a little studio out in Elland, outside Halifax, which was accidentally we hit upon the future of the Mekons then, because we met a guy called Bill Leader, who was the Alan Lomax of Britain, and we just found his studio in the Yellow Pages and wanted to go there. He needed someone to be in his studio to record, and it was this incredible kind of meeting of minds where he explained to us that there was this whole history of weird and interesting music that we could tap into. And so at that stage I started playing a bit of guitar and a bit of piano and bass on the second album, and Andy Corrigan played drums on quite a bit of it. Then we started using drum loops, and then as I kind of got more technically advanced, we in the early 80s we were experimenting with drum machines and any technology that fell in our path, really. And I fell out of love with punk rock. Basically, it was great, it was a big rush, and then suddenly it was this horrible monster that had been created that wished to consume us and destroy us, and we decided to break for the hills, and ended up kind of inventing the band as it exists now, where there's no rules and we can do whatever we feel like when we feel like. Bill Leader, yeah, really amazing guy. He's still alive and in his 90s now, but he recorded a lot of the early Burt Jansch stuff and loads of stuff you would consider to be part of that sort of 50s and 60s British folk boom. He's at the controls, and it's pretty impressive. And he was just a very, very interesting man, and he introduced us to some very interesting people. And he had a guy called John Gill who was a folk musician, but had worked on the Sex Pistols demos and knew everything about punk rock and was a big reggae head, loved reggae music. So we got very involved with him, and he played on some of the Mekons records. John Gill, and he died quite a long time ago now, but a remarkable guy who, just opened our minds up to. We thought punk was, the death of everything and year zero, and it was going to destroy music as it had ever been before. And then within 2 years, we were so bored with punk rock and how what a dead end it had become, and what a bunch of deadbeats had come and taken it over. It was more about leather jackets and Mohicans than it was about creative ideas. We kind of wanted to opt out of it, really. And this meeting Bill Leader was incredible, and he had the label called Tractor Records. And when Virgin dropped us, when they heard what we were doing at his studio, he offered to put the record out, and we were like, we felt so sorry for him. We were like, no, you don't have to do that. And God, that's one of the greatest regrets of my life. I so wish we'd put. It was like a legendary British folk label, and we just thought we'd be sullying it for him, and he was just an act of kindness. But I think he genuinely saw something there, something of some kind of tradition of kind of. He saw punk as part of a folk tradition of dissent and anti-virtuosity of, functional music, of people making music because they had to, not because they wanted to impress. And that was a great learning curve for me.
If you take a minute to have a peek at Jon's discography, you'll find that it goes in every direction. Apart from being in the Mekons, he's a member of the bands The Three Johns, the Waco Brothers, the Pine Valley Cosmonauts, and so many others. In addition, he's got a lot of solo material out there and is also a pretty prominent visual artist as well. I'm curious about how he figures out what to do next.
Well, it's always the latest thing. I'm really pleased with the new Mekons album that's coming out on Fire Records next year. It's called Mekons Horror, and that will come out in March of next year. And I've just had a record. It's nominally a solo record, but it's a band called the Jon Langford and the Bright Shiners. They make me put Jon Langford on it because it's otherwise, we lose a lot of record sales because people don't know what it is. So we can guarantee about 30 people will buy it if it says Jon Langford on it. But Jon Langford and the Bright Shiners, we've just been on tour with that most of this year, and it's I don't know, because it's the latest thing, I guess. To me, it's very, very exciting, and it's working with a different combination of people. There's a Mellotron playing singer from Austin, Texas, called Alice Spencer, who helped me with a lot with the songwriting on that album. And it's really different for me. And the other musicians are John Szymanski and Tamanay Garami, acoustic guitar player and a violin player. And I don't know, it's very different. And it's lovely, at my great and advanced age, to be able to be so enthusiastic about a project, because it's constantly surprising to me. And it's been lovely. It's lovely to play it live as well. Songs we created in the studio. But again, it all goes back to the ideas I was talking about with Where Were You, the simplicity and the economy. I don't want to be in a jam band. I don't want to be in a band where people show off their virtuosity and gain something out of that. I like to be in a band where everything ticks along in service of the song or the final product, so people become, you let your ego go away and you think about this one thing this group of people are making. It's very hard to do and quite hard to explain to some musicians because they just want to play as many notes as they can. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on us to, revisit the back catalogue and produce box sets and things like that. And, if that's what people want, I'm willing to try and make them as best as they can be. But I don't want to spend my days doing that, revisiting the old stuff. I want to spend my time making new things. It seems like, I don't know how much time we have left as a band, the Mekons. It's most bands don't survive more than, I don't want to be the Rolling Stones, going around. Well, I do actually, because we'd have loads of money. So no, I take that back. I do want to be the Rolling Stones, but it's not possible. But, in our position, the best possible thing for us is to be able to just have enough record sales and, support from our public or whoever they may be, that we can continue doing what we do and, not even think about commercial concerns, just to be able to make new things. And I think if we make new things and they're exciting and interesting, which they often are to me, that's an end in itself. And that's some kind of definition of success, I guess.
Does he think he'll ever slow down or retire?
I don't know. I didn't get the memo about what you're supposed to do when you retire. I had a good friend, Ian McLagan, who's in the Faces. He's a really funny guy, and he was playing with Billy Bragg and the Blokes, and I got to know him quite well. And he played with everyone. And his joke was, "What do you call a retired musician? A corpse." And I got him to tell that joke on a radio show because I'd heard him tell that joke, and we did a radio show, and he said he'd tell it, but he said, "I've been really busy, just throwing myself into my work, playing loads of gigs." I mean, why? Because, John, what do you call a retired musician? I went, "I don't know, Ian." And he went, "Rod Stewart."
And that's it for today's episode. Thank you to Jon for being here with us today. I was very excited to finally have him on the show. And keep an eye out for the Mekons' new record, tentatively called Horror, coming out soon. Check our show notes for links to his website to check out his future tour dates and his artwork. And a quick reminder that you can also buy my book on 80s musicians and where they are today, 80s Redux, and its sequel, Live Through That, on 90s artists, wherever you buy your books. And if you like this show, please, please, please leave a review where you're listening. It really helps others help find us. And of course, subscribe so that you'll know when the latest episode comes out. You can also follow me on Threads at Mike Hipple and Facebook at Mike Hipple Photo, all one word. Thanks for listening.
The Kimi Kato Show, featured on Pantheon Podcasts.
The Kimi Kato Show is a weekly exploration of Japanese pop culture in all its facets. Kimi and Jeremiah, as hosts, delve into various aspects of Japanese culture, including music, food, fashion, and film, offering listeners a comprehensive and entertaining look at what makes Japanese pop culture unique and intriguing. It is your invitation to Japan.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan.
I'm Doug. We're in the band Hoobastank.
Hi, I'm Takato Miyake, working for Suntory Global Spirits.
Hello, I'm Sincere from Ryusenkei.
Hello guys, this is Masata Kumi.
This is Chris Hart.
Hi, I am Sugizo. You are listening to Kimi Kato Show. Thank you.
Kimi Kato Show is brought to you by Evolve Entertainment Network, Pantheon Podcasts, and Radio Candy Media.